Tonight, I've gathered a handful of mysteries from Reddit. Stories that feel like cold wind slipping under a door you swear you locked. Some are tragic, some are unsettling, and some are the kind that stay with you in the quiet long after the screen goes dark. So get comfortable, let your eyes get heavy, and as always, if anything feels too intense for sleep, it's okay to pause and come back another night. Let's begin. On Thursday, December 12, 1985, a toddler was spotted wandering unaccompanied around a Kmart department store in Spanaway, Washington, with no parent or guardian in sight. When authorities tried to coax information out of her to help locate her parents, the only piece of information she was able to give was, "Mommy is in the trees." A photo was placed in the local newspaper, and the toddler was soon recognized as Crystal by her maternal grandmother, Louise Conrad, who took her into her care, later saying that Crystal appeared shaken and disturbed, perhaps by something she had seen. So where was Mommy? About 2 months later, the body of Diana Robertson, Crystal's mummy, was discovered deep in the forest around Elba, Washington, with 17 stab wounds and a tube sock tied around her neck. Nearby, an abandoned 1982 Plymouth pickup truck was discovered, covered in bloodstains, and with a handwritten note on the dashboard simply saying, "I love you, Diana." This truck belonged to her partner, Mike Reamer, an outdoorsman and trapper who often spent time in these woods. Mike, however, was nowhere to be found. Initially, the police believed him to be responsible for Diana's murder. Just 2 months prior, on October 19, 1985, Mike had been arrested and cited for domestic assault and malicious damage after allegedly kicking in a door at her apartment, throwing her to the floor, and rubbing her face in the carpet. They also connected her murder to a double murder that had occurred in the same woods 4 months earlier. A man named Stephen Harkins was found shot to death in his sleeping bag, while his companion, Ruth Cooper, was found strangled 2 months later. Both had a tube sock tied around their neck. So, was Mike a serial killer? He had apparently been in the woods at the very time that Harkins and Cooper were murdered, and certainly knew how to navigate the tricky terrain. But with no trace of him, there was no way to tell for certain. Over 20 years later, on March 26, 2011, a hiker discovered a partial human skull in the woods off of State Route 7 in Lewis County near Mineral, Washington, about a mile from where Diana's body had been found. Subsequent analysis revealed that it was indeed Mike, and that he was a likely homicide victim himself. So 4 murders in the same woods by an unknown assailant. The question remains, how did Crystal find herself wandering around the Kmart over 30 miles away? She must have been driven there and dropped off, presumably by the serial killer. Crystal must have spent a silent 45-minute drive in the car with the very person who killed her parents, with no memory of the event. That last image is the one that clings to the mind. The silence of a child in a car, the distance stretching out like a dark hallway, and the fact that the truth is still out there, somewhere in those trees. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what we know, it's what never gets answered. And now, a different kind of mystery, one with music in the woods and a hill that became a line between normal and never the same again. Went to a good-sized college party with several friends. The location for the party was out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. The road leading to the party was fairly straight with one major feature. The road was flat for the entire length, but it had a hill that was 30-ish feet tall halfway down it. A pretty good bump in the road, you might say. I was driving, and when I slowly topped the hill, I met a car heading in the opposite direction. That car slowed down to a stop. It was several of my friends temporarily leaving the party to make a beer run to the store. They knew who I was by my vehicle and flagged me down to ask if I needed anything from town, and we proceeded to chat for a minute about how the party was unfolding. They left. When we both backed up to talk, we just happened to stop on top of the hill. Mind you, this was not a busy road and located, as we say, out in the sticks. As we were parked talking for a brief minute, we all noticed there was a song coming from the surrounding woods. We figured it was someone having a private party in a parked car nearby in the woods, if you get my drift. The odd thing was, it was Turn the Page by Bob Seger, but it was on repeat. We all went on to meet back up and attend the party and thought nothing more of our chat on the hill. A few days later, I got a visit from several police officers about an investigation. They learned there was a party that night down the road with the hill in question. They were tracking down all attendees. That is how they found me. A hunter the day after the party found something at the base of the hill off the road. Someone driving another car that night heading in the same direction down the road I was on had wrecked their vehicle. The driver took the hill at insane speed and killed themselves in a wreck that had ran way off the road. Unsolved mystery that is still ongoing. The police said that they believe the driver they found was not the driver. There were 2 people in the car who wrecked. They found one set of bloody footprints that led to the top of the hill. It looked like someone moved the body behind the steering wheel and fled on foot. They found extra sets of bloody handprints in the car. The wild thing was that they found a CD with Bob Seger, Turn the Page in the CD player. Everyone that was on top of the hill that night volunteered to give fingerprints. Every so often, every few years, one of us gets a phone call to ask us to recount what we saw that night on top of that hill. A song on repeat in the woods is already unsettling, but when you realize it might have been the soundtrack to someone's final minutes or someone's escape, it turns ordinary memory into something haunted, and I can't stop thinking about that phone call that comes back every few years, like the past isn't finished with them yet. The next story feels less like a spooky mystery and more like a slow, heavy question that never got the justice it deserved. Alonzo Brooks. Not necessarily creepy in the traditional sense, though it has a long history and is literally close to home. The reboot of Unsolved Mysteries featured an episode about his disappearance. Because of it, after his death initially being ruled undetermined, he was exhumed and changed cause of death to murder, which was always pretty obvious. He went to a party in a small Kansas town, Lacine, with a few friends. Alonzo had some words with partygoers. His friends bailed. Alonzo doesn't come home. The next day, his shoes are found down the road, separately. Police search the area, including along a creek near the party house. Nothing. A few weeks later, the police let the family do a search, after not letting them be involved earlier. His body is almost immediately found along that same creek. Of note, though, is that his body didn't show any signs of deterioration or decomposition that would be expected of having been there for weeks. It's presumed he was in a fight at the party, dragged down the road, and possibly inadvertently killed in a shed near the party house that was torn down shortly after. The other fucked up part is that it suggested his body was kept in a meat locker and covered up by the cops, and when the family tried to get more involved in the search, his body was dumped along the creek, thereby explaining the lack of decomposition. The party had some 100 people there. Someone knows something, and no one is saying anything. Some mysteries don't feel mysterious because they're supernatural. They feel mysterious because they're human. Because silence can be a decision people make. And that line, someone knows something and no one is saying anything, that's the kind of sentence that can keep a family awake for years. And now, we shift to a case that feels like watching someone drift farther and farther from the shore, while everyone is shouting directions from land. Missing person Bryce Lespisa. While away in college, he started exhibiting some troubling behavior, and his parents were worried about him. He said he would drive home from college and that he had a lot he needed to talk about. On the way home, he pulled over like 3 separate times and just sat there for hours. At some point, about halfway home, he ran out of gas, and a roadside assistance employee delivered gas to him at 9 a.m. By noon, when he still hadn't arrived home, his mom called the insurance company and was able to contact the roadside assistance employee and have him check on Bryce. He found Bryce in the exact same spot where he had delivered gas to him hours earlier. He had Bryce call his mom, and Bryce said he would be home by 3 p.m. At 6 p.m., he is still not home, and his parents report him missing. The police find Bryce just 8 miles away from where he was previously sitting. He seems fine. They leave. He still just sits there. Again, the roadside assistance employee checks on Bryce and finds him in the same spot the cops left him hours earlier. Anyway, after a lot of that, when he does finally start heading home, he crashes the car off a cliff. It was found he accelerated while descending the hill, so they think he crashed on purpose. Police find the damaged vehicle, no Bryce, and he is never seen again. There's a particular kind of fear in this one, the kind where nothing happens for hours, and yet you can feel something is wrong. Those long pauses, the sitting, the waiting. It feels like a mind locked in a room with a door that won't open. And then, just like that, no answers, no trace, only the space where someone used to be. Next, we cross the ocean to Dublin, wind, and a figure in the frame who never gets a name. We have one in Ireland that always creeps me out. A young guy, 22 years old, vanishes one night after a work Christmas party. He's seen a few times on CCTV, heading back to his place of work to get an umbrella. It was a stormy night in Dublin, and a taxi strike had people taking a walk home. This guy worked in a bank, but not in the money part. He stopped by his office and is seen talking to an unidentified person on the CCTV. This person is hovering around, almost waiting for him to return. He also doesn't mention anything to his colleagues inside. There's also a theory about a girl from Alaska he'd met. There are lots of theories, but this case comes up every year as his family still search for answers. There's also no trace of his phone, potentially as the streets had been cleared due to a presidential visit by the President of the USA. The CCTV images of this case give me chills. Have a read and a watch. Security footage is supposed to make the world feel safer. Proof, clarity, a timeline you can trust. But sometimes CCTV does the opposite. It shows you a person alive in one frame, and in the next, they're simply swallowed by the night. And that unidentified person, hovering, waiting, feels like a shadow that never got caught. The next one is different, shorter, almost too strange to hold in your hands. The kind of story you keep replaying because your brain refuses to accept the shape of it. Not the creepiest, but my sister told me about it a few days ago, and I've been thinking about it ever since. I don't have a lot of details. It's a friend's coworker. Her 2-year-old was standing next to her on the sidewalk while she unloaded the baby out of the car. She heard a scream and turned around. 2 of her toddler's fingers were off his hand and on the ground in a pool of blood. They have no idea what happened. There was no blood on the car, no dog around, nothing. Just detached fingers lying on the ground. Our best guess is that he literally just bit them off. IDK if they checked his mouth for blood or anything. But I would think they'd know by that age if he had CIPA, and he wouldn't have been screaming in pain if he did. I keep thinking about it. Additional details. The fingers were sewn back on easily, making me think they probably weren't crushed in the car, which would cause them to be mangled. They were also found in the middle of the sidewalk with blood just there, not trailed from the car. I'll update if I find out more. Our friend isn't super close to the coworker, newish job, and so probably doesn't want to pry too much. That's the kind of mystery that gets under your skin because it doesn't come with a neat monster or obvious villain. It's just a normal sidewalk, a normal moment, and then something impossible on the ground. When there's no clear cause, your imagination starts trying to fill the gap, and it never picks comforting answers. Now, for the next one, we step back into history, a city, a string of bodies, and a killer who may have been hiding in plain sight, wearing the mask of expertise. So I was obsessed with this when I was a little girl. The Cleveland Torso Murderer, also known as the Butcher of Kingsbury Run, 1930s. There are said to be up to 20+ victims. The bodies were dismembered and scattered around the city. The unidentified killer would often wrap up the body parts in newspaper as if they were meat and leave the body parts in different parts of the city. Many of his victims were killed by decapitation and then further dismembered. Some men were castrated. The killer had ripped some hearts out, and one woman was drugged with morphine. It was suspected that the killer was a local surgeon due to the precisions of the dismemberments. Looking at the victims, this was someone who clearly had above-average knowledge of anatomy. The bodies were scrubbed and often drained of blood. He killed men and women, which was said to be unusual, as murderers would often choose the sex they were attracted to. It was rumored the killer was bisexual. He tended to pick people from Kingsbury Run area, as that was a Hooverville-type hobo jungle with vagrants, drunks, gamblers, etc. Elliot Ness of the Untouchables, then Cleveland's public safety director, was so desperate to solve the case, he ordered that the camps of Kingsbury Run be burned down. This was the Depression era, and the people were pissed. 9,100+ people were interrogated by the authorities to try and solve this case. Nope. Elliot Ness started using the fire department as a way around warrants and would say there were fire code violations at households he wanted to search. This was unlike him, but he was frustrated. Ness went so far as to kidnap a local surgeon he suspected to be the killer and privately interviewed him in a hotel room. He held the surgeon there for 3 days, as it was rumored the surgeon was so intoxicated it took that long for Ness to get him to start making sense. The surgeon was a veteran rumored to be bisexual and was an alcoholic from a wealthy family. This surgeon was also rumored to be schizoid and had an office around the Kingsbury Run area. Interestingly enough, the man who Ness suspected was the killer, Dr. Francis Sweeney, was the first cousin of one of Ness's political opponents, Congressman Martin L. Sweeney. Congressman Martin L. Sweeney would publicly mock Ness for his failure to catch the killer at large. Elliot Ness went to his grave believing the killer was local surgeon Francis Sweeney, but for some reason was never able to nail him. I think they made some type of deal. Dr. Francis Sweeney quickly checked himself into a sanatorium when he was getting the heat, and he spent the rest of his days bouncing around between mental hospitals and sending weird postcards to Ness and his family until he died in 1964 at a veterans hospital in Sandusky. The murders are unsolved to this day and rival that of Jack the Ripper. The murder swamp killings in Pittsburgh are rumored to be connected to this. The Black Dahlia murder in LA is speculated to be the same killer. Elliot Ness was sent a letter from LA from someone taunting him, saying to be the Cleveland torso murderer. The letter was signed DC, which stood for Doctor of Chiropractic. There's way more to it I'm not covering here, but I'm really surprised there hasn't been a major motion picture done by Tarantino, Coen Brothers, PTA, or Scorsese, because this is a great story. Old cases like this feel like a fog that never lifted. The details are sharp, almost cinematic, and yet the ending is empty. And when a story involves power, politics, and desperation, when even the people hunting the truth start bending rules, it makes you wonder how many answers got buried on purpose. Sometimes history doesn't just forget. Sometimes it's made to forget. For our final story tonight, we leave the US again, into a small city where the size makes the disappearance even harder to accept. Because when a place is only a few square miles, where can someone go? In 2015, a 17-year-old boy went missing without a trace in my home country. Now, I live in a small country, and our cities are small too. This happened in a city called Voru, which is 14 square kilometers, about 5 square miles, and has a population of 12,000. The boy, Marcus, was having a drink with his friends at a private house party. Around midnight, he leaves without telling his friends. 30 minutes later, there's a phone call between him and his friends, and he tells them he is near a local general store. After that, his phone is turned off. Another 30 minutes later, he is seen on a CCTV at the center of the city. He is walking with a steady pace and doesn't appear visibly drunk. No one has seen or heard from him since. A search is launched. 2 local small lakes are crisscross searches by volunteer divers. Hundreds of volunteers search the woods and plains of the area for several years. And this isn't any sort of wilderness area. Forests, yes, but people go camping, picking mushrooms and berries all over the place. Nobody found nothing. No items of clothing, no signs or evidence of anything. This was a sporty boy who played football and was generally doing good in life. The only irregular thing that week was that he and his girlfriend had broken up, so there was suspicion of suicide. If this was the case, how was nobody able to find a single trace of him? Another strange thing about it is that the family said that the local police were very frugal about the search. They refused to send out dogs or arrange divers, blaming lack of funding. This was all arranged by the family. Months into the disappearance, the police hadn't opened a criminal investigation, and they stopped active search efforts 1 month after the boy disappeared. Our police is generally trusted and reliable. It would be unheard of to have that level of police cover-up around here. But it is rather strange what the family was saying. This is the sad story. 8 years later, there's still not a single shred of evidence on what happened to him. That's what makes it feel unreal. A small city, familiar paths, searched water, searched woods, and still nothing. When a person disappears without leaving even a single thread behind, it can feel less like a mystery and more like a tear in reality, like the world briefly forgot to follow its own rules. And that's where we'll end tonight's collection. Stories that don't resolve, questions that don't settle, and the strange quiet that follows when the truth refuses to surface. If you're listening in bed, let your breathing slow down. Remind yourself, you're here, you're safe, and the night is just the night. And if you want, tomorrow night, we can open another door.